Hi everyone, I'm Lauren, your sewing buddy, and today I'm starting on a new project, which is an Elven wrap vest. This is for a Secret Santa, but I'm fairly certain the recipient doesn't watch my channel. Even if they do, they won't know it's for them until they actually open it. This one is challenging because the only info I had to go off of were some photos of them on Instagram and their t-shirt size. So that's part of why I did this as a wrap, so it has a little bit more adjustability. In any case, let's get started. I also forgot to mention I now have a Ko-fi and a Patreon. Um, to I hit 100 subscribers, so I figured it was around time. I'm still trying to figure out what to do to celebrate 100 subscribers. So if you want, I can do a giveaway of one of the patterns from my pattern sorting videos. We could do a sewing room tour. We could do something else. Leave suggestions in the comments, and I will put something together hopefully for next week. Uh, Links to Ko-fi and Patreon are in the description, and now we can actually get started. All right, so I'm using this blue wool blend fabric, and it's got this neat interwoven pattern on it, which I think the recipient's really going to enjoy. So I just need to make sure that I have enough of this here and figure out exactly what shape I want this vest to take. And it looks like I have plenty, so let's see. I've got my average measurements here for the t-shirt size that I was given, and I'm going to start drafting the back of the vest. Sorry, the shoulder line up there is off screen. Then the armhole is based off of the bust measurement, and I decided to cut that armhole a little bit longer than originally thought because I am notorious for making small armholes. The waist, I'm actually putting a little bit higher than I normally would because this person is fairly high-waisted. Also, I think for a wrap vest, that can be very forgiving. So cut that armhole a little bit deeper, once again, because that's a failing of mine. But now that I have that drafted, I want to draft the front piece to make sure that I have enough space for both skirts on this fabric. So flipping this over and being overly meticulous about those edges lining up. After my historical Halloween project, I'm a little bit paranoid about that. So you can see that nice dark backside of the fabric. I think I'm not going to use a lining for this. I'm just going to do French seams and let that dark inside speak for itself. So I do need to get my length measurement off of this back bodice piece though. So I just need to transfer that over here. And then because this is a wrap, I need to see how far I want this to actually wrap around. First I'm going to mark out the shoulder, except I didn't actually add anything to that. Okay, so I think I want to add about 6 inches. So I'll put that for the waist, and then also mark where the actual waist measurement starts. And then if I'm adding 6 inches to the shoulders, that's where that starts and that's where that ends. And that doesn't look right. It's sort of a box between the shoulder and the waist, and that's not the way the back was shaped. So this would be the neckline here, just straight diagonal, simple. But I really need to double check that shoulder measurement. So it should actually be here, which is even less. But this tailor's chuck does have that little brush on the end, so you can actually erase the things that you've put down that you don't want to be there anymore. And then draw a much firmer line. Okay, so I'm not sure if that's right, but I think I'm gonna go with it. And then draw a nice line up there to make sure those meet. Yeah. Double check that. Yeah. Everything is as it should be. So measure out the bust from here. That's where it was different. Okay. Draw in that armhole once again, that bust line, and that is our front bodice shape. And then the skirt comes out from there. But I'm going to start with the back skirt because it's going to be more narrow, and then I'll know how much room I have to work with for the front skirt. And also how long I want this to be. So I know the hip measurement should be somewhere around here. I'm just going to draw that down a little bit. Try to get that straight. Once again, fix those edges, because paranoia. Okay, so I think what I'm going to have to do is, rather than have them side by side at all, they're going to need to just be front and back, or top and bottom. So there won't be any space where the skirts are next to each other. And yes, that just happened. I broke my pinky nail, but we'll just rip that off and keep going because we are warriors. So getting this cut out, I've already cut out the back neck piece there. You can see the little divot. And then I just need to follow the line that I drew. Which again, I am very thankful that I trace it directly onto the fabric, because then I don't have to fuss with keeping a pattern laying straight or anything along those lines. And if I do make an error, then that's a new design choice. That's not a mistake. And then from here, I want to do a rough curve in, because again, this is something that will help the skirt hem, well, the vest hem be flat. And then for the back, that tells me how much space I have to work with for that. And if I line these up, hey, that was pretty good on the armhole. Then I can see around how much flare I would want to put on here. Which, unfortunately, I don't have exactly enough length left, so I'm going to have to cut the back piece a little bit shorter, which isn't the end of the world. I just probably should have measured out the halfway point so that I didn't lose those few inches. Because, you know, the longer a vest is, the more elfy it is, right? So I'm going to trace that skirt shape and then get this cut. Starting out with that neckline here. And then I am gonna double think that shoulder line. Because I think I do want this to actually be a lot steeper. I used the shoulder from the back as a guide to see that I did definitely mismeasure that. But it's okay, because this is an experiment and we will see how this turns out. So then I just need to cut this side seam here. And then the armhole. And we are good. Those are the pieces for the basic front and back of the vest. So these are going to overlap like so. And then there's going to be a tie that goes around, goes through a hole in that side seam, and it ties in the back. And that's going to be made from this lovely silver satin. And so I decided I want the skirt a little bit fuller than what we cut here. So I'm going to add in some panels on the sides and on the back. I just want to measure out what that would be because I want them to go all the way up to the waist and then flare out from there. Luckily, I have a lot of material left over from the side of both of these panels. So I just want to make sure I'm right on the center line because this is going to be for the back panel. I want it to go all the way up to the waist. And then I also want the side to be that same measurement. So rather than just cutting all the way down and having some to trim off at the end, I'm going to measure out where that should be. Actually line up with the right number. There we go. Just draw in that line really roughly. Because once again, I am not a precise seamstress. It's not my jam. And then I'm going to draw this down once I make sure I've got this actually right, because it was incorrect before. Just draw that in a little bit of a curve. I'll cut the curve better. You know me. And again, I want to make sure when I'm starting to cut the curve from the center, I just go straight at a right angle from that folded edge. And then follow this line up, although not precisely because it is, as you can see, a bit of a curved line. But there we go, panel for the center back is done. I just need to split the center back and sew that in, like so. And then for the sides, get some stray threads out of here. I'm kind of sad that I won't actually have any of this fabric left for me because it is a gorgeous fabric. I picked it up from the bargain basement at Costume College, and I have no regrets other than that it sat in my stash for so long. With this, I have 2 pieces of the fabric, and then that's folded in half, so I have 4 layers that I'm cutting through. This way they will be symmetrical, and I can cut for both sides at once. And once again, making sure that that side measurement is the same as the vertical measurement, because that's how these things work. Drawing that curve, drawing that line going up. Don't be too precious about it. And time for the snips. And that one is probably a little bit pointed at the bottom edge, but that's okay because we're going to cover that edge with bias tape anyway, so it won't be too visible. And here's where I learned that 4 is probably about the limit for layers of this fabric these scissors can cut through, which honestly is pretty good for a wool blend. I haven't done a burn test on this fabric or anything, just it handles like wool and it has a little bit of a sheen to it, so I'm pretty sure there's something synthetic in there. So what I need to do next is figure out how high I need to cut in the back. So for that, I'm just gonna lay this out right along the center line, put a mark a little bit down from the top because I do need that seam allowance, and then just follow this nice crease from the fabric. That's part of why I don't always iron all of the pieces before I start working with them, which I know is bad habits. We all know I have a lot of bad habits. That's who I am. And then because this is going to be a French seam, I'm pinning with wrong sides together. Because then what I'm going to do is sew those at about a 1/4 inch and then trim it down, flip it, and then sew it again at about a 1/4 inch. That way I will have nice finished seams on the inside without having to fell everything down. It does get a little bit tricky with these joined hems, like where it's going to join at the top, but it's workable. I'll figure it out. See, look, it's not perfect, but it's something I can fuss with and make better. And it's what I needed it to be. So now I need to get these side panels pinned on. Once again, wrong sides together. And these panels should be much, much easier to get in because I'm actually treating the side of the panel as its own side seam all the way up, so there's no weird space where it joins up with the rest of the fabric that has to match up perfectly with other things. And yeah, that back panel, it was kind of a headache. Worst case scenario, I know there's going to be a bow that covers it at the very end when everything is tied up. But let's get this secured first. Just going to pin the other side here. And I do have a lot of fears with this project because it's not something the person specifically asked for. They look like more of a jeans and t-shirt kind of person, but also a lot of their photos have them in elf ears. So hopefully this is something that they don't realize was missing from their life. I mean, ultimately with a garment, that's kind of what you're looking to create, right? I mean, especially if it's something that you're designing specifically for a person, that will, you want to bring that something that was missing and really just make them smile and feel good about themselves while they wear it. As you can see by my clothes, this is a new day, but I got those side panels attached. Look at those nice French seams, except for the top of that center back, which unfortunately it's what it is. I can't really do much better with that than what I have going on there. So now I get to do the full side seam, front panel to back panel, and this one I want to make sure I leave that opening for the tie to go through. And this is another French seam, so wrong sides together, and I'm going to need to mark where the opening should be, which is going to be a little bit tricky to do with a French seam, at least making the opening look good and tidy. But I figure as long as it looks good on the outside and it's secure on the inside, I'll be okay. Just want to leave that mark so I don't sew through where the opening's supposed to be, and then finish pinning up the side of the bodice. And from there, things should be good to go. The shoulder still needs to be done, but I'll do that after. Okay, here we have that nice side seam. It did in fact turn out a lot better than the back seam did. So just gonna do the same thing to the other side. There's the opening for you. And then once I get both of these sewn together, it's time to work on binding. So I just want to lay this all out for you so you can see how it's going to be. So folds over like so. This will be the silver that ties it, and then this will also be the binding all the way around the top and all the raw edges really. So next I just need to get these shoulders pinned together and get that sewn. And once that's done, we get to cut out a collar for this because I decided on sort of a curved standing collar. Not curved like where it curves out like a Dracula collar, but like just has a nice gentle curve to it, not a straight, strict Mandarin collar or anything like that. So once I get these shoulders good and squared away, we can get that shaped and see where we go. So my first attempt at the collar shape did not go well, and I don't want to talk about it. I'm just going to toss that aside. So I figured out what I need to do is actually a straight cut across. Luckily, I still have enough interfacing to cut that. I'm sort of using the interfacing as my pattern guide. So first thing I need to do is measure the collar and see I'm estimating where I want it to end on the overlap part. Essentially, wherever the collar ends, it's going to turn into bias tape going down. So, just want to make sure I have enough here that I can still make this happen. Luckily, it's high in the middle and narrow at the ends, which is exactly the shape that I have left here, if the interfacing would only cooperate with me. Which, of course, because of all of the irregular cuts in it, it won't. Come on. Don't make me cut you apart. I may, in fact, just have to trim off that top bit. Unless this stays. Okay, we're good. Mostly. But I just need to measure that I have enough length here. Again, I measure from the one on my measuring tape because I don't trust the edge. Looks like I'm good. Right to there should be perfect. That was fortuitous. You know what? Just gonna make a little snip there so that stops pulling, and maybe that'll help. And failing that, I'm just gonna pin this in place. Because if it's not going to agree with you, lock it down. Okay, so for the height here, the bias tape is going to be 2 inches wide total, so I'll wind up with 1/2 inch wide for the finished product, but I want this to be that same 2 inches. And then for the height at the neck, I know I need some seam allowance in there, so right about there should be good. And then just trace a nice gentle curve between the two. It's a little bit like a sine wave, but not quite. Kind of comes out looking like a cap sleeve or something along those lines. But this is for the neck, not the sleeve. All right. And then just get that cut. And this will be my base pattern for cutting the, I'm going to cut this out of both the satin and the wool. I want the satin to be on the outside, but I want the inside to be the wool. So the part close to the neck, which I know isn't the best for comfort, but is going to be the best for style. And if you're going to be a fancy elf, it's all about style. So what I need to do next is pin this interfacing onto the collar to make sure I actually have the shape right, because I would be very sad if I cut this out of my 2 other fabrics and it turned out that it wasn't the shape that I needed. Always want to double check these things before you go through with your fancy expensive fabrics. I mean, again, this fabric wasn't that expensive because it came from the bargain basement, but if I wanted to get more of it, I'm not even sure where I would, and also it would be, I'm sure, costly. So I'm just pinning half of this on here so I can get a good idea. And it looks like that is the shape that I want. So yeah, we're in good positioning. So I get that unpinned, and now we're ready to cut from the satin and the wool. And this is the first time the first time for this project cutting into the satin. And I'm not going to do a fold over on this because I do want it to match really exactly. But what I am going to do is layer the satin and the wool and just do one cut for both, because again, that's going to get the best match all around. And I'm making sure I have wrong sides together so that I'm not, oh crap. And this is the whitest I have. So I'm gonna do the collar lining sideways. Nothing wrong with that. But again, this is the best way to make sure that everything matches up really nicely. Just going to actually pin this down this time and cut around it so that everything is exactly the same. I'm doing this because the satin is a slippery fabric and the wool is a kind of squiggly fabric, so this way, if I draw the lines and they don't come out quite right, well, if I drew the lines, they might not come up quite right and then I would be sad. But if I'm just tracing, or rather cutting around the interfacing piece, which is my pattern piece for this, then it should be perfect. Just want to make sure anywhere where it might pull or get weird, I get a pin in to keep everything nice and steady. And also make sure that all of my pins are well inside my cutting lines. With the silver shears you see me use on occasion, I have cut onto a pin with those and felt really bad, and that's part of why they're craft scissors now, because they've taken a few too many dings like that. So I am a lot more careful with these nice black ones. And this luckily is a good straight line, just all the way down. And there we go. All 3 pieces cut out. And then for layering these, I want the interfacing to be attached to the outside, because that's the flimsier fabric. And then the wool will get flipped to the inside after they're all sewn together. So I'm just gonna get these pinned, again being nice and careful about keeping everything on the same lines, because I want this to be a very nice smooth collar with no bunching or weirdness to it. So who's ever heard of an elf with a weird bunchy collar, right? It does take a little bit of finagling just to make sure everything's lined up right. I'm trying to make sure that I keep equal tension on both pieces of fabric, which ideally would be 0, but we are human, supposedly. And I know you get a lot of footage of me just pinning things, but that is where I make a lot of mistakes, and I think it's important to show that too. Again, I didn't show the mistake I made with the collar because it was just, like, looking back at it, it's way too obvious, and I don't know where my brain was at thinking that. What I did was cut to match the curve of the neckline, which would create a flat collar, not a standing collar. But you can see here my edges don't quite match up, which means somewhere I messed up the tension. So I'm starting from the other end and giving a little bit of slack in between each pin, not enough to create any real distortion, but enough that eventually everything will catch up with itself. And as I get these last pieces pinned together, I think that's where we're going to end for this week. Next week you'll get to see the finished collar all put together. Once again, if you're able, I invite you to please visit my Ko-fi or my Patreon pages, which are linked in the description. Those will really help me with keeping this channel going, especially during the pandemic, because I would like to not have to go into a job and risk exposure. Again, luckily my spouse can work from home and is wonderful, and you know, I would be totally lost without them, but every little bit helps, and if you're not able to, don't worry about it. Please also like, subscribe, share, comment. Again, with our 100 sub celebration ideas, let me know what you think. And I will see you again next week with the collar. I hope that you continue to go make beautiful things.